The Foundation's webinar.
Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen.
Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the, I think it's the fourth Foundations webinar that we've done. For those of you, I can see you're asking in the chat box. If you're an attendee, then we can't see you or hear you. You're totally safe. You're not going to suddenly appear on screen. But welcome. Glad you all kind of managed to negotiate your way through Zoom. I'm Paul Smith from Foundations.
The Foundation's webinar.
Foundations webinar. So that's what I look like when I used to be able to cut my hair and had less facial hair as well. So I'll be hosting this afternoon. And if you aren't aware of Foundations, we're the national body for home improvement agencies, which we've done since 2000. And our remit has expanded over the last 5 years to support local authorities with disabled facilities grants. So we still do a free range of free offers, including process workshops, which we can do online for you. We do free training on DFG legislation and regulations, and we can also do a DFG quality standard assessment. So if you're interested in any of that,
find out more at foundations.uk.com.
So we'll be just over an hour today, and the video will be available afterwards as well. So about the webinars, we started these at the start of the year. We thought that time and travel would be difficult. Little did we know how difficult travel would be. And the idea is to bring content straight to your desk. So we're doing these monthly. We have content from Foundations and we have some other input from partners. And I think a lot of you already found the chat feature. So you can press Alt-H if you want to open the chat box and ask any questions, make any comments, and join in the afternoon. Make it as interactive as you like. So this afternoon, we'll do a few introductions. Then I'll go through a case that was in the courts a couple of weeks ago to do with DFG. It's fairly rare that a DFG goes to the court, so I will unpack some of that for you. We've got Gino from Stiltz talking about the home lift. Then we've got Roy McNally, one of the regional advisors from Foundations, talking about the Home Improvement Agency Quality Mark, which is now free of charge for any home improvement agencies that are interested in doing that. Then we've got Larry and Kimberley from Closomat, and then we'll wrap up with the DFG Surgery, which your chance to ask me any questions about DFG, or if I can't answer them, then hopefully some of the other 250 odd people that are here will be able to chip in the answer as well. So if you've got any DFG questions, if you think those up over the next hour or so, we'll answer those at the end.
Poll time. Let's see what you think.
So one of the things we can do is do a poll. So I'd be interested to see who's here today. So I'll just launch the poll now. You just tick which one's closest to your job. So it's OTs are way out in the lead at the moment, followed by technical officers, caseworkers and housing managers in third. And a surge in technical officers, a few others. Okay, there's about 40 of you left to vote, so I'll just give it another 5 seconds. There we go. So OT's well out in the lead, about a third of you, followed by a range of housing people. Cool. Right, we'll have a few other polls as we go through this afternoon. So first up, I was going to talk about a case that was in the High Courts a few weeks ago. It's, as I said, it's fairly rare that a DFG case goes to court. They usually go to the Ombudsman, but there was some really interesting stuff that you should be aware of in this particular case. So it was a case, it concerned a lady called Mrs. McEwen. She was 63 and she's a tenant of Islington Council. She lives in a 3-storey maisonette with her husband and adult son, and she's got another grown-up son who lives just across the road. She's had health problems and disabilities for a while and had other adaptations to her home. As I can say, it's a 3-storey home. She's had stair lifts between each of the floors. She's got a ramp into the back garden and various other grab rails. Unfortunately, she had her right leg amputated in April 2019 and now uses a wheelchair. So she's a full-time wheelchair user. And I don't think this is the actual house, but from the description in the court case, I think this is what the house kind of looks like. So it's a 3-storey house, and the front entrance door is a kind of lower ground floor level, and there's a set of steps down to it. And she can't manage those steps anymore, and she has to get her grown-up sons to carry her down those steps, and up the steps into and out the house. And the grant application was for a platform lift where you can see kind of the gravel garden is. So she applied for a DFG for this platform lift, and Islington Council refused, as they said it was not reasonable and practicable, primarily because they felt that the rest of the house was no longer suitable for her. Now she was a full-time wheelchair user, and they made that decision in November 2019. So they offered Mrs. McEwen a purpose-built, new build home just under 2 miles away from where she lived, but she said she didn't want to move. Her son was across the road. She got emotional attachment to the property, got lots of friends and support nearby, and she wanted to stay where she is. So she applied to the courts for judicial review to challenge Islington's decision. So a few things that came out of this case, and I think one of the great comments from the judge was that when you're deciding on a DFG, you should try to say yes. And what he said was, the existence of mandatory grants is extremely rare, and that rarity illustrates that the mindset of the decision-making authority must not be to search for grounds to refuse the grant, but in good faith to limit its examination to the relevant matters. So very much, yeah, just try to say yes where you can. But then it got into more of the detail of the case, and yeah, it'd be interesting in your thoughts as we go through these. So Islington's decision to not approve the grant for the lift was firstly that it wasn't necessarily appropriate because she will have increased difficulty using the other stair lifts, the toilet, kitchen and bathroom, making the house unsuitable, and that there's other more suitable accommodation relatively close by. And they also said it's not reasonable and practicable due to the suitability of the rest of the house again, but also they felt that the likelihood of planning permission for the platform lift in that bit of front garden was unlikely, and that they thought the cost was likely to be above the maximum grant limit of £30,000. So somebody's asked about DFG for a council home, and I think that's the first point, that DFG in the legislation applies to every tenure. So if you look through the legislation, then a council tenant, a housing association tenant, a private tenant, an owner-occupier are equally as eligible to apply for a DFG as anybody else, or as each other. The only difference with a council tenant is that the adaptation works need to be paid for from the housing revenue account rather than from the allocation from the government. So for that reason, some local authorities have a different way of handling council adaptations, but under the legislation, there's no difference between any sorts of tenants. But in this particular case, and it was fairly clear from the judgment, was that Islington had confused their separate roles as landlord of council housing and also the decision maker for DFGs, which would, I think, made the ruling a bit more interesting if they'd been a bit clearer on that. But some of the things that the judge very clearly said was that availability of suitable alternative accommodation is not a valid reason for refusing a DFG. And he took the idea that as it applies to all tenures equally, it would be very difficult to make an owner-occupier move or force an owner-occupier to move. So if you can't force an owner-occupier to move, you can't force a tenant to move. Did recognise that the offer to facilitate a move is good practice. But as I say, as the legislation covers all tenures, you can't force somebody to move or can't refuse to approve a grant because they don't want to move. And as I say, it's quite tricky that Islington got their roles confused, and they didn't seem to say whether or not they would have refused permission for the adaptations as a landlord, which they could potentially have done. I guess it'd be interesting if it does go back to court whether they do that or not. So it's good you're asking some of the questions I'm going to cover on the next couple of slides. So, you're ahead of me. In terms of, I think the biggest thing that came from this court case is about the purposes. So any of you that done DFG basics training or been improving DFGs for a while, you will know that the legislation says that there are a number of purposes for which a DFG must be approved. So that's the full list of purposes. So there's about 12 of them there. And I think what usually happens is that they're wrapped into one application. So somebody will make an application potentially for getting in and out of the property, access to a bath or shower, and access to a toilet maybe. And you assess usually whether it's necessary and appropriate against a range of purposes. But what the judge said in this case is that you need to consider each of those purposes separately. So in this case, Islington was saying that it wasn't necessarily appropriate to fit the platform lift because she would still have difficulty with the stair lifts and accessing the bathroom, which are separate purposes. But the judge said that's totally irrelevant. You judge just consider the platform lift on its own merits without any reference to the other purposes. So you assess necessary and appropriate and then reasonable and practicable solely based on the purposes that the application is for. So Islington should have just assessed for the platform lift, and it was totally irrelevant that they were thinking about the stair lift and the bathrooms. What he also said was that the kind of the estimate for the cost of platform lift was about 24,000, and Islington said, well, there's potentially extra works that will take it over 30, and we don't know whether Miss McEwen will be able to afford that. And the judge said, again, that's totally irrelevant. She's applying for a grant for up to 30,000. She'll be contracting the works with, I think it was Terry Lifts in this instance. And if there are extra costs over and above £30,000, that's her issue. It's nothing to do with the council, and the council can't refuse permission, can't refuse approval on that basis. Islington also said they didn't think it would get planning permission, and because in the regulations that govern DFG, you can include costs for planning permission. The judge said that you could approve the grant, and Mrs. McEwen would then have to seek planning permission, but you can't refuse a grant simply on the basis that they haven't already got planning permission. Whether it's then paid again afterwards or there's kind of a change would depend on whether you'd actually paid out the grant, which you can't refuse to approve it. So just based on the questions, the presentation will be available afterwards, and the video you'll be able to watch afterwards. If any of you are interested in reading the full verdict, then there is a copy on the Foundation's website in our DFG document library, which has got about 70 other DFG related documents as well. So that was the verdict, and the judge asked Islington to overturn the decision and revisit it. But I think it does have some consequences for how we look at other DFGs going forwards. So, for instance, if each purpose needs to be looked at on its own merits, then it would lead you to saying that a disabled person can make separate applications against each purpose. Then each of those would be up to a maximum of 30,000. So, for instance, if somebody needs a lift in the front garden, as Mrs. McEwen did, she could apply for a grant for that purpose for up to 30,000. Then if she needed the bathroom adapting, she could apply for another grant for that purpose, again, up to a maximum of 30,000. So how this would apply, I guess, to perhaps larger ground floor extensions, where you need specialist equipment, I think it could lead you to saying that you could apply for the purpose of getting to a bedroom and having a £30,000 grant for that. You may need access to a wash basin, which is a specialist wash basin, and that could lead you to a separate grant to meet that purpose as well. So in some ways, it could mean that the £30,000 limit almost becomes meaningless. And as Emma says, yes, that could end up you spending 120k on one house potentially, because you can only look at each purpose in isolation. So where this will lead to would be interesting to see, and whether there are cases that come forward like this. But I think it is a very significant change in how DFG legislation has been interpreted. The guidance itself is a little bit at odds, or the current guidance is certainly a little bit at odds with how this is written. And in the judgment, the judge did disagree with some of the previous guidance that had come out about DFGs in the past. So yeah, to make things interesting, I think, particularly on those very few and far between, but very large and complicated adaptations. It could be a way to circumnavigate or kind of get around the £30,000 limit if you apply for various different purposes. So I think in terms of some of the questions, obviously for each purpose, you would still have to look at whether it's necessary, appropriate and reasonable and practicable. So if one option is less costly than another. You may think that's more reasonable and practicable to do. Are the council appealing? I don't know. I haven't heard actually whether the council are going to appeal. I suppose to a certain extent it's a judicial review, so they've been told to go away and relook at their decision. So I guess that's their way to appeal. And I guess if Mrs. McEwen is refused again, it'll be back in court later this year. Yeah, I think it is kind of as Helen's talking about, the need to be assessed in the first instance, and then the internal adaptations not being practical. The guidance talks about kind of the impact on the rest of the house and other people living there, but as it doesn't say that in the legislation, the judge has taken it to be every purpose needs to be looked at on its own merits. I'm not entirely sure that was the thinking in the DFG was first written, but at the moment that's the case law we have. So does anybody think that's potentially a good idea? No. Okay. So there's one yes, two yeses. So for those, for most cases, it won't make any practical difference. You kind of level access showers and your standard ramps and your stair lifts will make no difference to, because they obviously come in with under £30,000 in most cases. But it will be those really expensive and extensive extensions that will be quite different on. It still raises the issue of whether, as a landlord, they could have refused to make the adaptations, thinking that it's a family home, so they didn't consider it appropriate to kind of turn it into an adapted property, which I think potentially they could do after speaking to the Equality and Human Rights Commission about it. But certainly in terms of DFG, then it seems that they were definitely wrong to refuse it. So I think there'll be quite a lot of discussion on this going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts on the findings from the DFG review when that's responded to by the government. And how we kind of adapt the guidance and kind of practice to deal with that. But I guess it in some ways it depends on the benefits of a particular case. So if in a lot of these cases, I guess particularly for children, then spending that sort of money does make sense because it saves the public purse in the longer term. But I think it's kind of the impact, I think probably particularly on smaller local authorities where kind of £100,000, £100,000 on one house is going to take the vast majority of their budget for a particular year. So it's actually, if you've got time to read it at the moment, it's quite an interesting read. I think one of the other things to point out is that, has anybody heard of R versus Birmingham ex parte Mohammed or the Calderdale case? So I mostly knows. So those were the kind of previous two DFG cases that went to the High Court. The first of those set out that a local authority can't refuse approval because they run out of money. And I know lots of authorities do at least delay approvals because of a lack of money. And the other one was particularly looking at how you do necessary and appropriate and reasonable and practical as a two-stage test. And there was also a case around two siblings, one with challenging behaviours, who attacked his brother in the night, and the DFG was for a bedroom in the loft. So that was initially refused by the council and overturned by the court. So as nobody had heard of those, or very few of you had heard of those cases, then I guess the question is, will this case also kind of disappear into the ether and not be particularly well known? will it be something that becomes part of customer practice going forward? It'll be interesting to see. But all those cases you can find on the Foundation's website. So if you've got an hour or two spare, then it's well worth a read and getting your head around how the law should work in theory, if not always in practice. Yeah, we can certainly add. I can add the link. There's some of you asking about the links to these on the Foundation's website. There's a section for DFG's DFG and adaptations. And if you go into the policy page, there's a searchable document library where there's 70 DFG documents of some sort, including the 3 court cases I've just mentioned. So you can read them all there. And Philip was asking about if you could have 2 DFG applications running at the same time. I think that was the point that was made in the verdict, that there's probably nothing to stop you doing that. There's certainly nothing in the legislation that prohibits that. And then Sarah's saying that they've done 2 DFGs where there's been 2 disabled people living at the same address. So now you could have 2 people each having DFGs for 6 purposes. You could have 12 DFGs running at the same time. I think if that was the case, it would probably make sense to use your discretion under your housing assistance policy or regulatory reform order and just wrap it all into one, rather than having 12 lots of grant applications. And that's where Jill's asking about fettering discretion. So that's where, if you've got a housing assistance policy or under the regulatory reform order, you have discretion to do pretty much anything. So you can't have a blanket policy that you're not going to do something. So you couldn't have a blanket policy to say you'd never do a grant over 30,000. So that would be fettering your discretion. And you have to have some way of considering extraordinary cases. So quite a lot to think about in that particular case. It arrived in my inbox on a Saturday morning, and it took me a few hours to kind of read it and digest it and work out what it meant. So very, very strongly recommend you have a read of it. And I think I'm sure we'll revisit it at either roadshows or the webinars in the future. And if you're on the Facebook group, there's already a chat or a conversation going about this topic. So if you're already a member, then please do add to the conversation. So I think we've already done that, haven't we? So lots of stuff there in the chat box. And yeah, please carry on entering your thoughts. I think it's definitely one for the future. Thanks, Francis. Yeah, I do have an exciting weekend.
And now it's time for the guest.
Okay, so our first guest today is Gino from Stiltz. Hi, Gino.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can, and I can see you.
Excellent.
If you want to share your screen, then I think we should be good to go.
Okay, it says I can't because you're showing your screen.
Okay, so I'll stop mine.
Okay.
There we go.
Right, here we go. Just got to try and find the presentation. I can't see where it is actually. Is it on my? Can you see my screen? The entire screen, I take it, yeah.
We can't at the moment, but if you share it, I'm sure we'll be able to.
Okay, right, I've got the presentation on, so I've just press share screen.
Yep. You can either pick your desktop or pick the PowerPoint window.
You see that?
So look, sometimes takes a few seconds. Yep.
Okay, can you see the PowerPoint presentation? Come on now.
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. Right, let's crack on then. Sorry for those technical hitches. Right, here we go. There we go. That was specially for you, Paul, because I know that you like your special effects. Who'd have thought that a home lift could make such a great entrance, eh? Right, I'm Gino. I'm the sales director for Stiltz here in the UK. I'm just going to briefly go through who Stiltz are, for those of you that don't know, the sort of products and services that we offer, some of the applications that we're able to put our lifts into, and also briefly touch on a CPD offering that we do up and down the country for OTs, should they request it. So just very briefly, Stiltz was founded in 2010. It's been quite a steep acceleration curve within the business. Since 2010, I've been joined the business in 2016 when there were 45 people within the business. And this year we've now got in excess of 200, and we are in the process of just moving into a new factory in the UK, and we've just moved into our new factory in China just before Christmas. So we've had quite a lot of growth. Primarily, a lot of our business has been selling either through to resellers on the continent, or in the UK selling direct to consumers. As part of that, we're also members of the British Healthcare Traders Association. Being still quite a young company, I guess, of 10 years old, we're just going through stages of getting accreditations as a business. So we've just gone through our ISO standards for quality management, environmental management, and health and safety. And we've had various awards over the last 4 or 5 years for our growth, particularly our international growth. And I guess one of the ones which I'm really proud to be able to share with you today is that we've just been awarded the Queen's Award for Enterprise 2020 for international trade. And that is literally hot off the press today. We've been under embargo for not being able to be able to say anything about that. We've known for a few weeks now. But that's a fantastic of achievement in our business, and being so young as well. So that's where we are as a business. We are privately owned, and we are investing heavily at the moment into new products. So essentially what we offer as a business up and down the country now are specifically for local authorities, our joint assessment and visits through our sales advisors. Obviously being able to give you quotations, do the surveys, manufacture product to suit the client needs. We handle all the planning and installation of the product and the service for that internally. So we're a bit unique in some respects because we've mainly been dealing with private customers. We felt it better to help manage the customer journey and their expectations to employ our own builders. A lot of people tend to subcontract that part of it out. We're trying to do as much of it ourselves so that we're in control of the process. Don't always get it right. I don't think anyone gets it right all of the time, but it's important that how we actually pick things up and make sure that we correct things. And we do pride ourselves in being a very customer-centric type business, very much putting the client in the center and the focus of everything that we do. So basically all our products have safety features. They are ultimately lifting equipment that go into people's homes. So we need to make sure that they are intrinsically safe. So like with what you're probably more traditionally used to using, they've got safety edges on the underpan. Something that we do slightly different is we have a light curtain, which I'll kind of move and explain to a little bit later on. We have a battery backup system, an emergency lowering system in there. All of the lifts have an in-car telephone. We comply with machinery directive and also the European standards for lifting home lifts, EN 8141, and also the wheelchair version. We do have one which is, it's a specific requirement for local authorities actually here in the UK, which is the British standard BS 5900, which basically means that the lift has a half-an-hour fire seal if the lift is parked at the top or bottom of its travel, just to make sure that there's fire integrity. And actually doing that testing, I actually went on and actually watched the testing of this. So got a really brief clip of that being tested next. And it's amazing when you watch it, because the actual lifts have to go into or have the the lid's on a kiln, which goes up to 800 degrees C when it operates. So it's quite a thing to see. Very noisy as well. What you're seeing there is steam that's coming up from the plasterboard. This is actually the base plate or the floor of the lift that passed the test. You can see it's quite a very harsh test that it has to go through. I'm not shouting quite so loud now. So that's just showing the testing facilities that the lifts have to go through, and that's in Warrington in the UK. Oh, there we go. I briefly spoke about the light curtain. Most home lifts have what they call positive sensitive edges on there, which means that you have to press the switch for the lift to stop. We use a light curtain in place of that, which basically means that when the lift is traveling up, if there is an obstruction or anything that comes out, specifically when you're going through the aperture, where there's a very much a dangerous or pinch point there, the lift will stop immediately rather than waiting for the safety edge to be depressed. So it's quite old technology, tried and tested. Because our lifts are fully enclosed, it does give us the advantage that we're able to have the small window that is open if they have a half height door to use a different means of safety with it. So moving on to actually the products itself, or the products themselves, what you'll see is that the first thing is we've worked very hard on the aesthetics and styling of the lift, as well as the functionality. And I think one of the things that we looked at when we first saw what was available out on the market in general terms is that products that are designed for functionality, but they're not always designed for aesthetics. And I certainly know that if I were ever in a position that I needed a product like this, then I wouldn't want it to compromise the living environment or my home. And people are proud of their homes, and we feel that just because the equipment has to do a job, get them from one floor to the next, there's no reason that it shouldn't actually look part of the fabric of the home and be something that you're proud of. And that's one of the reasons that we've designed our products with that in mind, is to make sure that they do look good. The product that you're looking at the moment is our Duo lift. It's a single person lift, or well, two-person home lift. It's very cozy, but you can get two people in there. Something that isn't really commonly used in the UK as much. It's probably something that I think in the main you would normally use stair lifts. We're finding increasingly there are situations where stair lifts aren't suitable, and this is a good alternative too, which would help potentially stop having to do maybe a ground floor adaptation to the property, or having to create a bathing facility downstairs. This enables you to still use the full use of the house, not have to sometimes save money actually, not having to do that extra building work and adaptation. The other unit that we're now looking at is our Trio lift, or Trio Plus. This was one that we actually did for a young girl that was on DIY SOS. So this product is something which is large enough to take a wheelchair. And again, we have the BS 5900 compliant product with this as well, which we're able to use for local authorities should they require that standard. And just very briefly on that standard, it's not actually a law. It's I'm not saying a nice to have, but it's not a prerequisite. The law is that the product needs to comply to the machinery directive and the EN standards. However, the main part of that is about building regulations and making sure that it becomes approved by the building regulations once the lift's installed. And every lift that we install, we've partnered with a local authority who know how our products go in and understand our products, so they can help speed up that process. But every single lift goes through a planning application to make sure that any building works that we have done are done in the correct fashion and safety for the client in their home. So the sort of applications we put the lift into are where the client condition deems it. So if they maybe have poor knee flexion, not able to manage the stairs, and potentially would need a stair lift, but a stair lift may not be suitable because of that. They may have transfer issues from a seating to standing or vice versa. And again, with the benefit of the lift, it's something that you just walk straight into, so there's no need to transfer from a seat into standing position, or again vice versa at the top or bottom of the stairs. Where the stairs are too narrow, we've done an awful lot of work around Wales and in the valleys, where we found the duo lift has been particularly useful, where there are some small cottages with staircases that are very narrow, where previously they would normally be looking at a ground floor adaptation or potentially moving home. The one advantage of home lifts is there is a multi-user flexibility with it. So you don't have any issues with varying seat heights or the difficulty with the left or right-handed control. We're able to make the lift controls ambidextrous, and it does mean that whether you're short, tall, slightly heavier or not, as the case may be, that you're able to use the product. Obviously, we also, and I guess majority of our business up to now has come from clients that are looking at future-proofing their home. And by that, they're looking at potentially when they're getting older and the difficulties they may have in getting in and around their home. And if they are doing an adaptation, then we are finding that a lot of people are now looking at purchasing home lifts like what we're producing at the moment. And just to give you an idea of how that's increasing in use, when we first started the business, I think in the first year, bless the two guys that started it, probably sold about 5 lifts. We are doing in excess of 100 units a month now, just in the UK, installs that is. So, and a lot of that at the moment still is private clients with a very, very fast growing local authority use, thankfully. One of the other unique features that we have, because the lift is effectively self-supporting through the 2 legs, we don't have any structural requirements of it needing to go up against a wall, which means that we can put it pretty much in the middle of a room. And in this situation, we've got what we call a through car, where the lift is going in a stair void area, which would previously be unused. This one has got exactly what it says, a through car, so the client can come in from either side of the lift. As the lift gets to the top floor, there's a banister gate which is created and interlocked with it for safety, and they can just get in and out of the lift quite easily. This is one that we've just completed or are completing in the next few days. It's one that we've been doing through the lockdown, so our guys have been out there wearing their safety equipment, and that's one of the reasons you can see the bottom picture with the doorway that looks blocked out, because we've tried to make the areas safe and isolate the clients that are in there. But it was deemed that it was safer for us to try and put the lift in and get the client up and down, because at the moment the father's having to carry the child up and down the stairs. So we've continued and put the lift in. As you can see, that again is in a void situation and is a through car. So next I'm just going to play a brief video, which is a nice case study of a duo lift that we've installed.
In 2013, I had a kayaking accident and injured my knee, and unfortunately for me the injury healed but the pain never went away, and so I was in and out of hospitals, and doctors were a bit confused because obviously there was nothing physically wrong, but I was still reporting this pain. And in 2015, I was diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome. I spent the whole of 2016 bedbound, wheelchair-bound, mixture of the two. And it was then that we decided that the house wasn't safe because I was nearly falling up the stairs, falling down the stairs. My parents were having to almost carry me up the stairs at points. So we started looking at lifts. It is a chronic pain condition. It classically will affect one area of the body, so a limb or whatever. It can spread. It's a neurological pain condition, so it affects your nervous system, and the nervous system is basically overfiring and is constantly sending pain messages to my brain, even though there's nothing physically wrong. So some days I can walk around with my crutches and I'm fine. Other days I'm bedbound. You get burning pain, stabbing pain, swelling, redness. We did consider a stair lift, but it being a Victorian house, the stairs are quite narrow, and the number of stairs that we needed it to go up meant the cost went up and up and up. We did a quick Google search of lift companies, and Stiltz was the top one. We decided the obvious choice was to have it in my bedroom because that's predominantly where I spent most of my time, and that was on the same level as the living room, and it's only a few stairs up to the bathroom. So it all came down to safety and just logistics. It was really quick and easy. They came in, made the hole, and then they put it all together and it was done within a day. It immediately gave my independence back because I was able to get from the ground floor to my bedroom, to the living room, to the bathroom. Before I had the lift, whoever was in the house was having to help me up the stairs for safety reasons. It's been a bit of a lifesaver. So I've spent a lot of time in physio, so that's doing stretching, desensitisation, doing everything that we can that's non-medical as such, to not prevent the symptoms but slow them down. And I've done a lot of psychological work, so a lot of coping methods. Alex Chalk, MP for Cheltenham, came in to speak to us at university, and he noticed I was a disabled student because of the crutches, and he came over and had a chat, and we got talking about CRPS and the lack of awareness and how something needed to change. And he basically took my story and said, actually, I want you to come to the Houses of Parliament and speak to people that can help make change. I just want to start the ball rolling and just to get MPs aware, so that if they have a constituent come to them with CRPS, they will at least have heard of CRPS and they will know what it means or what it stands for. It's really quiet, it's see-through, which is really nice because then even when it's in my room it's not intrusive. And also the fact that it can be plugged straight into a wall, like we don't have to worry about hydraulics or anything like that. Obviously my family are really pleased because it's given me my independence back and it gives them freedom. So yeah, I would really recommend them. They're really friendly. The first thing we noticed was they wanted to help us and look at our case individually rather than just trying to sell us a lift. The customer service was just first class, basically.
I think it's always good to see sometimes these case studies, and often the case that you don't actually always get to see the finished, well, we certainly don't always get to see the finished article, but I guess one of the things that I think you all do out there is do change people's lives. And I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but sometimes when you watch things like that, it does kind of make you feel like you're not just doing a normal job, you're doing a great job and helping people. So as part of something else that we do, because our lifts are a little bit different, it does mean that we are able to fit them in places that potentially normal lifts wouldn't normally fit. What we do is a Stiltz CPD, where we come along to your offices under normal circumstances, or even able to do webinars now, and basically go through understanding some of the funding sources that are available out there, DFG clearly being one of them. Obviously, whether it's choice or necessity as part of the assessment process, then assessing the client and making sure that the lift is suitable, and then taking that into consideration as how we assess the environment and look for the best place for a lift, making sure that the house is accessible for them, and making sure that you become a little bit more confident, I guess, in the process of specifying a home lift, taking into all the above into consideration. So if you are interested in any of these sessions, then you can either book it through myself direct, which the email's shown below, which is gino@stiltz.co.uk. Alternatively, I know that you can go through the Foundation's website, where we also offer that through them, and I'm sure that Paul will pass your details on, and we'll be more than happy to arrange something locally for you, or as the case may be, a webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gino. I think there's a few questions for you in the chat box. I don't know if you want to type those in and kind of have a scroll through them and have a look. And
I certainly can do, if I can work out how to do that. Yeah, that's fine.
So I will, if you can, I'll take the screen back.
Excellent. There we go.
Right. Thank you. So I think certainly having visited you in your, it's probably your old factory, wasn't it? When I came.
Well, we're still there actually. We're still hopefully moving. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of three of the key things that I thought were that you have a one team install, so it's kind of all done by two people in a day or so, isn't it? So it's not somebody cuts the floor and then comes along later and fits the lift, and you have to live with a hole for a week or two.
Yeah, we call them super teams, but we've moved to that again through really experiences that our customers have had, which have said previously in the past that you've got different trades coming in and trying to make it as easy as possible for them, really, because it's quite an upheaval sometimes in having this sort of work going on in your home, that if we can say we're going to come in Monday and by Wednesday or Thursday you'll have a lift installed, it does make it a lot easier for them. Yeah,
I don't think I was found with the biggest problem with through floor lifts was always annoying the neighbours. So you're not attached to the wall, and you don't have the noisy hydraulics.
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah.
So, I think that's the kind of key benefits. That certainly, if you're managing DFGs, you want as few complaints as possible, and having ongoing issue with neighbours can take up so much time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't have any party wall issues and things like that. We do have. I guess the one issue that we have at the moment, I say an issue, is we have two teams within Stiltz. One is the direct team that obviously people or consumers would purchase, and the other is the local authority team, which is the team that I look after. So generally the local authority team are, should I say, a little bit more price aggressive because we don't have any lead generation costs and things. Unfortunately, it's sheer economics with how that all works. So what I would stress to your guys is that or the participants, if they do have any requirements, that they ask to speak to either myself or the local authority team, and we'll make sure that we can do that.
Great. Thanks, Gino.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Poll time. Let's see what you think.
So we'll move on to the poll. So I've made this one anonymous, so you can be as truthful as you like. So how busy are you at the moment? There you go. So we're about 2/3 of the way through. give it a few more seconds for the last few of you to vote. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So quite an interesting result, I think. I guess probably the people that are busier, I guess probably OTs and kind of assessing people being discharged from hospital maybe. But most, the biggest was kind of 30%, much quieter than usual. So I guess that's probably down to DFG's kind of grinding pretty much to a halt. So thank you for that, really interesting. Right, now I'm going to hand over to Roy McNally from Foundations, and he's going to talk you through some of the changes we've made to the DFG Quality Mark. So I'll just give you control of the mouse, Roy, and away you go.
Jolly good, thanks, Paul. Hello, everyone. Some of you will know me. I'm the North of England Development, we're not called development managers anymore. We're regional advisors for the North of England Foundations. And I've got a special remit around Quality Mark, which is our quality assessment framework for home improvement agencies. We've recently had some changes, and I just want to quickly take you through those changes. If you want more detail, obviously you can contact me and I'll go into more detail, or we could do a webinar, an hour webinar purely on Quality Mark if there's enough interest. So let me just go through this. Now, Paul, I'm hoping, do we just click to advance?
I think so. Well, there's the controls at the kind of towards the bottom right.
Let's have a look. Okay, yeah, here we go. So yeah, as I said, from the 1st of April, we've done some changes to Quality Mark, and the headlines around that are, it's now an entirely desktop approach. So basically, you send us your evidence, we assess it back at Foundations, and we send you the results. And there's just one pass grade. In the past, we've had a range of different grading options, and they tended to confuse people. So what we've done is we've just done a pass now, but we've still got a gold standard option, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is this. It's a stepping stone to the advice quality standard. So if any of you don't know what the AQS is, it's the kind of industry standard quality assessment framework for providers of advice. And we've structured the Quality Mark in such a way that it provides a stepping stone for agencies who acquire Quality Mark to go on to do the advice quality standard at a later date. And then they'll obviously be considered the kind of the leading lights in the field. And the biggest change is, you'll be pleased to know, we've made the Quality Mark completely free of charge. And the reason for that is the AQS assessment, if you were to go on to do it, is chargeable. We don't charge for it. It's Recognising Excellence who actually handle that. They charge for it. And so to make it more attractive for home improvement agencies to go on and do the AQS assessment, we've removed all the charges associated with Quality Mark, so you get it completely free of charge. But to fall in line with the AQS standard, it's now a 2-yearly assessment cycle. In the past, it used to be every 3 years. But hopefully, once you've done it once and you see the structure of it, it shouldn't present too much of an issue with you to go on and do it every 2 years. So as I mentioned, it is an entirely desktop approach where the agency completes a self-assessment form, which has got a range of objectives and clauses, which you've got to evidence and provide, describe and provide evidence for. So you gather evidence to meet the objectives stated in the self-assessment. And the important thing is, no regional advisor would call. It's typically done by the regional advisor in your particular area. So Those ones that come in from the north of England, I will typically do them. But those ones from London, for example, the London boroughs, my colleague Dave Eldridge, he'll pick them up. So there will be local knowledge of your particular agency. That particular regional advisor will be involved. And the great thing is you complete it at your own pace. In the past, we've always said if you're picking up a quality mark from scratch, give yourselves at least 2 to 3 months to prepare yourselves and gather the evidence for it. But, you know, you can take as long as you want with this, really. It's very much complete it at your own pace. So, now my screen, I think, won't advance. Why won't there we go. So just to give you an example of the self-assessment form, this is what you're presented with. And basically, as you can see down the side, there's a main objective, and in this case, minimum services from an HIA, and a series of clauses within that. And on the other columns, you've got the space to put your evidence, describe what you do to meet those clauses, and you provide us with the documents. So in this particular example, Paul, my thing doesn't seem to be advancing.
I'll move it for you then.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got this particular user put, we've got a service booklet which describes the services in full, and it's given a reference to where the service booklet is amongst the evidence that they send. And if you could click again, why won't it let me click?
I don't know.
What we do is we rag each of the clauses. So if it exists in this case, we feel the evidence meets the requirements of the clause. And we go through every clause in that. So basically, as I say, there's just one pass grade, and it's not, there we go. In order to pass, the agency must meet all the requirements of the objectives. And the important thing is failure to meet the requirements of the objectives won't necessarily result in a fail. Instead, what we try to do with you, we just don't pass you. And we work with you to build what you've got in place so you will eventually meet those requirements. And once you've passed the assessment, you receive a certificate which is valid for 2 years from that point. Okay, if we can advance. And as I mentioned, it's a stepping stone to AQS. It's an optional assessment, and it's the de facto standard for any advice provider. And obtaining both quality mark and AQS indicates that the agency has obtained the gold standard in terms of its policies and procedures, but also the safety of its advice given. As I mentioned earlier, AQS is a paid assessment, but the fact that we've now removed the fees for quality mark, we're hoping that will make it more attractive for more agencies to go ahead and do that. And so just to go over the process, just to summarize, the agency requests a self-assessment form when you're looking to do quality mark. We send that to you. Then you complete the self-assessment form and you send us all the evidence that meets the evidence which relates to the descriptions you put in the self-assessment form. And as I said, you can take as long as you wish to gather that evidence. Then we have foundations. We assess that evidence against all those objectives. Ideally, we'd like to receive it in an electronic format, either by email zip files, encrypted files, but we do, and we have accepted evidence in paper files. It's not our preferred way, but we will do it. And then once we've done the assessment, if you're successful, if we can click again. Yeah. If your evidence provided meets the quality mark objectives, we issue you with a certificate, and it will last 2 years. And at this point, that's when you can decide if you'd like to go on to apply to do the AQS accreditation. Next. So that's it, just a very quick canter through Quality Mark. If you want more information, you can speak to your regional advisor or our office, or you can simply give me an email there. Or if you stick your email address in the chat box, and if there's enough interest, we can go into this in more detail and do a dedicated webinar purely on Quality Mark. There's enough interest. So I hope you found that interesting, and I'll hand you back to Paul.
Thanks, Roy. Yeah, we'll pick up in the chat box if there's any questions or any interest in doing that. So there's some discussions about kind of virtual assessments or kind of video assessments, and we're going to cover that in next month's webinar. We've been collecting some resources on that, so we'll go through all your comments on the chat and pick some of those up as well. But that'll be part of next month's webinar.
And now it's time for the guest.
So second guest, we've got Larry and Kimberley from Closomat.
Good afternoon.
Hi, it's another company, a factory I have visited. So I will hand over control to Kimberley now and let them talk you through the Closomat toilet and single-handed care.
Excellent, thank you. Can I just check you can hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay, so today, just so you're aware, my name is Kimberley Lawson. I'm one of the product specialists with Closomat. And in our chat box today, we've got Larry Beale, another product specialist. And as we go through today, Larry's going to answer any questions that you have. Okay, perfect. So again, I am having the same issue as previous, so I apologise about that, but the slides won't move on.
There you go, I think you've got control of it now.
Yeah, the control box from earlier is not there now though.
There you go, I'll move it on for you then.
Okay, we'll see if it pops up, I'll let you know. Okay, so we're looking at the Closomat toilet, single-handed care and making the numbers work. So in this section, what we are going to focus on is the current situation, technology or carers, and in that is assisted toileting, improving lives, carers, the costs, Closomat, and working for you. Okay, thanks. So the current situation, so we have to look at the considerations of the Care Act 2014, and section 1 of the Care Act states that social services has a duty to uphold the well-being of an individual. Well-being is defined to include 9 components, and some of those are personal dignity, physical and mental health, together with emotional well-being, control over day-to-day life, suitability of a person's living accommodation, and personal relationships. And also on the screen you will notice by 2041, 25% of the population in UK will be over 65. So we are living much, much longer than previously. Life expectancy is rising, and for men it's rising to 83 and it's rising to 87 for women. So social care in the UK has twice the average turnover of staff, and I'm sure you are all very aware of that. And local authorities are keen to invest in a reduction in the care packages to best manage the resources. So breakdown in informational care can lead to an increased cost in health and social care, and single-handed care will contribute to addressing these issues. Okay, so if we could move the slide, Paul, thanks. Thank you. So what equipment adaptations do you think you hear about when you hear the term single-handed care? Would you stick it in the chat box if what comes to mind for use? Anybody, anything they're using daily for single-handed care? Ceiling tracking, yes. Thanks, Helen. Got a few ceiling track hoists. Wendy-lets, yep, the Wendy-let sheets, thanks. That's Julie and Robin, thank you. So there's quite a few things come out, isn't there? So, and profile bed, brilliant, yep. So you'll see on this slide here, you know, we're kind of hitting on these, and we won't cover everything today, because when you think of single-handed care, there's many things, like your stand age returns, you know, as well as wheelchairs and shower chairs and things as well. So if we could move the slide on again, Paul. So what we're going to look at is technology or carers, okay? So if we could transition to the next slide. So technology or carers. So what we've got to consider if we address the following things. So for the end user and the client, is it control? Are they getting control over their day-to-day living? What can this be doing to their personal relationships? Also their personal dignity. Do they have the suitable living accommodation that they require? How is their emotional well-being? And overall, you know, dignity, it plays a massive part. However, there are other costs which I'm sure that you are all well aware of. So that's the cost there to the client, but there are costs to an occupational therapist, for example, your time doing assessments, you know, follow-ups. I know many of you write a lot of notes. There's also a cost to the local authority as well, if maybe they're putting a care package in place, you know, with a carer, etc. So there are more costs than obviously just the cost to the client. So if we could move the slide on, Paul, thanks. Thank you. So by using technology, we can improve lives. So what we want to improve is independence, dignity and hygiene. Maintenance of relationships. So you've got husband and wife, for example, can be a caregiver. But on top of that, you also have teenagers looking after parents or parents looking after children. And it's about readdressing that balance and putting that relationship back to the husband-wife or parent-child relationship. Also, we would look to reduce a risk of falls. We know the massive cost involved if that was to happen. Increased cleansing and washing. Better management of menstruation as well. We hope to reduce the risk to the carer. I'm sure many of you have come across carers who have had injuries, you know, through their job, back injuries, etc. And increased confidence for the client ultimately would lead to better well-being. Okay, so if we could move that slide on, thanks, Paul, thanks. So what actually are the costs? So a care package costs approximately £15 per hour. That's nearly £11,000 per year working on a carer, going in for 14 hours a week, and that's to assist in toileting. However, if we needed a full-time carer during that time, the cost then escalates and it works out roughly £30,000 per year. So this is figures from 2018. That figure may have increased in this time, as we know, obviously, wages and things increase. So keep that figure of £30,000 in mind. And if we move to the next slide, so how can we balance those costs? So if that £30,000, you'll see on this slide here, the care package is £30,000. A Palma Vita toilet and an aerolite, both together comes in at £6,000. As many of you used a Palma or a aerolite before? Has anybody seen these? Yes, Rachel. Oh, Rachel, no, yep, some very good, worked, yep, excellent. So I just want to check, you knew what we were referring to, perfect. So your Palma and your aerolite comes in approximately £6,000. If we added onto that a 10-year service and a maintenance package, that increases the price by a further £3,500. However, it leaves you with a saving, and that saving's £20,500. if you do have this equipment in place, it does pay for itself within 3 to 4 months, and it is often fully grant funded, which is fairly important. Okay, so some interesting costs there and facts. So if we could move this slide on, thanks Paul. So on top of that, the occupational therapist role is very valuable, as demonstrated here. So occupational therapists and short care services help 63% of people back to their independence. That's a massive figure if you think about it, the impact that occupational therapists have. And then occupational therapy reduces GP visits by up to 72%. So the role of the occupational therapist is very, very important. So if we could move on to the next slide. Excellent. So relieving the pressure on the social care, you know, the value of occupational therapy, we're just going to continue a little on that. So I don't expect you to read all 3 boxes. I know this is going to be sent out to you at a later date, but a few pieces I would like to point you to is it states in later life, modifications made to the home can reduce difficulty with activities of daily living by 75%, which is, I think, an amazing figure to help people, that, you know, 75%. And another one to think about as well is assistive technology, home adaptations can increase people's ability to perform everyday activities by 49%. So imagine if we were to combine those modifications and technology, what that figure might be, because these are looking at those figures separately. So very interesting there. So if we could move to the next slide. Thank you. Thanks. So, however, despite the advantages in the equipment and design, a thorough moving and handling risk assessment is the foundation of every care plan. And I'm sure you have written up many, many care plans over your time. So if we move on to Closomat now, if we can move this slide. So has many of you actually worked with product specialists within your area, you know, previously? There are quite a few. Yes, perfect, brilliant. Yep, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so in Closomat, what we do is we take responsibility for the whole process. We work with occupational therapists, or we complete surveys alone, taking full responsibility. The fact that we have thousands of variations on our products, from seat height to the wash arms, you know, we're there to support both the occupational therapist and the client through the full process. So we start that with the client assessment and product specification. We also do product demonstrations. I'm sure many of you have seen our demonstration toilets, and we do our install survey as well. So something that's fairly new, some of you might not have seen, is the Closomat no quibble guarantee. So this is something that we're just putting in place, and basically providing that someone like myself or Larry completes our survey and that specification is followed, we then replace or change any part of the specification that's not right for your client, and that's free of charge. So if it's a different height required or the down arm, etc., we will come and do that, and that's free of charge. So I think that's an amazing part of the service for the company, for yourselves. Okay, so if we could move on to the next slide, thank you. So we're with you, we're here, we're with you every step of the way. So if you don't know, Closomat is a family-owned British company. And we have nearly 60 years experience of working in the UK. We have a dedicated team of over 80 people. There are 9 product specialists, and I'm sure you have met many of them. We have a team of 20 self-employed service engineers. Now, our engineers, just to make you aware, they carry approximately £8,000 worth of stock in their vans daily. And they fix 95% of faults on that first call out, which I think is an amazing fix rate, considering, you know, the product that they need to fix. People need their toilets to work, so they've worked very hard on that. We have after sales service and maintenance, as you can see in the pictures. We've got some of our guys from the office there, and we have got over 57,000 Closomats have been installed so far in the UK. But one thing to make you aware of though, at the moment we are still able to do installs in certain cases, so if you do need us, we are there at the end of the phone or other forms of communication, which I will show you later on in this presentation. So we are there for you, you know, if you do happen to need us, certainly get in touch. We are still working, that the team in those pictures are still working as well. Excellent. So if you, next one, thanks very much. So I'm sure many of you have seen our Palma Vita. This is our Palma Vita toilet. Some of the features and benefits, it's the UK's #1 wash dry toilet. It's made in the UK for the UK market. It's most effective wash dry performance. It's very versatile. We can, you know, and adaptable. We can adapt it to, you know, many variations that you would need. It's very easy to use and it can be used hands-free, and it has a safe working load of 30 stone. However, if you do any adaptations on it, some adaptations from height to different flush options, to seat options, and by changing your seat options you can then take the weight up to 57 stone, which is fairly important. Okay, if we can move on the next one. Thank you. So that's what we do. We do a range of wash dry toilets, but we don't only do that. We also are heavily involved in changing places. I'm sure many of you have heard of changing places. We do chairs, changing benches, hoists, shower seats, hand basins, the drop down rails, body dryers. So as a company, we're much more than just a toilet. Okay, so in the picture, what you can see, you know, that's a lot of the things that we can also provide for you. And if we move to the next slide, this is our compliance. I'm sure many of you have seen some of these. So we're RAS approved, and then we've also got our compliance in environmental, quality management, and the water regulatory advisory service, as well as health and safety. Okay. So we move down. So just to summarise, the cost of care package in single-handed care is often linked to manual handling equipment. However, with the use of solutions such as the Closomat toilet, the cost of care can be reduced significantly, with the unit paying for itself in as little as 3 to 4 months. Maybe more importantly though, are the benefits are not only monetary, they're critical in supporting dignity, health and the well-being for your client and their carers throughout maximising their independence as well. Okay, so if we move to our next slide, thanks. So just to summarise what we've discussed, so we looked at the current situation, technology or carers, assisted toileting, improving lives, carers and the costs, and Closomat working for you. So on our next slide is more information for you. So you can find out more information at info@Closomat. You've got a live chat now. The live chat is manned office hours, and what I would say is if you have any questions at all, get on our website. The live chat pops up anyway, and feel free to ask anything at all. It's been a great tool, you know, in this difficult time. And we've got our website as well, which is currently getting revamped and going to look lovely and sparkly and new. So we've got our email there at info@Closomat. However, if you feel you need to get in touch with myself, if you have any questions, my name's Kimberley with LEY, and then it's .lawson@closomat.co.uk. And if we move to the next slide, so we've got some further reading. This will be sent out by Paul and his team. So what we're looking at is activity analysis of toileting, guide to specification for moving and handling in a toilet environment, embracing risks, and the Care Act 2014. So these are all going to be sent out to you at a later date. And if we move to the next slide, I just want to say thanks very much for your time, and hopefully Larry managed to answer all your questions in the chat box.
Yep, thank you, Kimberley. I think Larry's been quite busy with his typing away.
Okay.
There's plenty of questions going past, so it's good to have questions, because I think we're now on
The DFG Surgery. Your questions answered.
talking about questions answered. Has anybody got any DFG related questions that they want to ask as we kind of draw to the close? We'll finish about 1:30. Unless you haven't got any questions at all, then we might have a finish it a little bit earlier. So, question: any update autumn budget going forward? I think, as you probably expect, lots of things have gone a little bit into the background at the moment. So, not expecting anything imminently DFG related. So a few more Closomat questions going through. Any news on the DFG review? It was really close. and then, yeah. So who knows? Who knows? If someone had a DFG, how long should they remain at the property? I was told that they are tied to the property. Is this the case? Nope. They have to have an intention to stay there for 5 years, but that's an intention and not a promise. Although if you've applied a land charge, that could last for up to 10 years if they're an owner. So you do have to have a policy that says why you wouldn't reclaim the land charge, but they don't have, they're not forced to stay there for 5 years. It's something we cover in the DFG basics training, Robin. So if you and your team want that, then we do that for free. Can DFG cover sensory rooms? Yes, it can. Deceased clients when just done. There's a set of clauses in the DFG legislation that cover what happens if somebody dies. You can either stop work, you can carry on and finish it, or you can put it back to how it was. So if you've got questions like that, so we do free DFG basics training, and it's a good chance to refresh yourselves on all those sorts of bits and pieces. And again, somebody asking about the definition of DFG. Again, we cover that in the DFG basics training. We'll be doing some more free sessions of those if you keep an eye on the Foundation's website. Can you apply a land charge for discretionary assistance as a local land charge, or is it a land charge? You used to be able to apply land charges for discretionary assistance, but that bit of legislation was repealed. So now, unless you can sneak past your land charge people, it would have to be a full land charge. Can a DFG cover carers accommodation? The purposes I went through earlier in the presentation, and carers accommodation isn't one of those, so it would have to be a discretionary item. Is there a list of HIAs that hold the quality standard? If you go on to findmyhia.org.uk, the ones that hold the quality mark are listed first. And one of the other benefits of holding the quality mark is you get the best listing on Find My HIA as well. Grants team are currently refusing to consider installing fences for a garden DFG. If it makes the garden safer, I missed scroll past too quickly, but you can certainly do fencing and safety issues as part of a DFG. Soundproofing rooms, if it's making it safer for the person or others living there, then you could certainly do that. So any of those are typical questions that we get on Facebook group, actually. So if you're not already a member, or if you are already a member and want to pose those questions, then there's currently another nearly 900 people in there that I'm sure will give you an answer. Just one there, if funding is not used for this year, will MHCLG take funding back? No, they won't. You can carry it forward to next year. Okay. So just a reminder that we do free DFG basics training, which covers the legislation and regulations, working on a short training course on introduction to means testing, and we also do the DFG quality standard. If there's anything else, then pop us a message and we'll try and cover those as well.
Find out more at foundations.uk.com. Poll time. Let's see what you think.
One last poll. Talked to a company that does training on Care Act or social care means testing, which you may remember from the DFG review was the recommendation to move to that for the means test. So would you be interested in a short kind of an hour or so's webinar on how the social care means testing works? So I've launched the poll for you. Okay, that's about 2/3 of you voted. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 2/3 of you will be interested, and another quarter maybe. So we'll get that sorted out, and it'll be on the website, on the Facebook page, and in the newsletters. So I know some of you have joined during the meeting today. If you do want to join the private Facebook group, go to www.facebook.com/group/DFG champions. Answer a few questions just to make sure you're not a member of the public trying to get in, and you can join nearly 900 of your colleagues in there. And coming up in webinars, we'll do another one of these in May, but over the next couple of weeks, we're just about to release the details. Some of you remember we did some workshops just over 2 years ago looking at the options for the DFG review. So we're going to rerun those in webinar format, myself and Sheila McIntosh, over the next couple of weeks. You're very welcome to come and join us again and be able to vote on the options again, and we'll be interested to see whether we get the same results as we did 2 years ago. So that'll be coming out on the Facebook group, on the website, and in newsletters very soon. So thank you all for coming today. Hope you found it useful and enjoyable. Had had almost 300 people, so that's been our biggest webinar to date. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again either next month for the webinars, or in the next couple of weeks for the DFG review week caps. So thank you all. See you again soon.